What's up, Dol-Fans? This is Juice and Big Seth.
You're listening to the Dol-Fan UK podcast. And Juice, I can't wait to dive in.
Let's go.
Hello, welcome to the 2023 schedule release edition of the Dol-Fan UK podcast. Hope everybody is well. This week joined by Lee, as always. How are you doing, sir?
Very well, thank you.
Good, and also delighted to welcome back to the pod, friend of the show from the Go Time Dolphins podcast, Kadeem Simmons. Welcome back, Kadeem.
Thanks for having me back. It's been a while, but always, I'm a long-term listener, I guess, returning viewer, if that makes sense.
It does. Always welcome glad to have you on. So thanks for joining us this time. So we're going to go through the schedule in a bit more detail shortly, but first some other bits of news to go through. First off, the Dolphins have signed Isaiah Wynn to a one-year contract. For me, nothing more than a camp body, I don't think, unless you guys think anything different. Kadeem, what is he competition for that left or right tackle spot, or has he been purely brought in for comp?
I think he's not just competition for left or right tackle. I think he's also competition for mostly left guard, but also right guard. I think he's someone with so much versatility that he's worth just having on the roster because you never know when he might be needed. So you got your starting five, but it's really handy on match days to have an offensive lineman who has the ability to come in and play multiple positions. So no, I think he has a very good chance of making the roster simply because of his versatility.
Lee, convinced me why I should be pleased about this signing, because I read somewhere online, and it was I think it was dolphinstalk.com, Mike quoted the fact that he had a PFF rating in a game against Cleveland of 5.0. So convinced me, Lee, why he's a good signing.
Because he's certainly better than me. No, I think we had this conversation last week, didn't we? When we kind of went through some of the draft stuff, we thought that Chris Greer might do more in the draft and kind of post-draft when it comes to the offensive line, because we felt like it still needs some work. You've brought in a former first-round pick. There's no risk to it, so it's only upside. Worst case scenarios, he doesn't make any impact. If he does, it's a great signing. So at this stage, there's really nothing to lose.
Talking of signings, Kadeem, you made me aware shortly before we came on air of another signing that's been made today. Share with us some details of that, would you please?
Yeah, so the Dolphins brought in defensive back Bryce Thompson. Spent 2 years with the Saints. I think he played 8 games across those 2 years, but has recently been in the XFL. So, he kept himself busy, kept himself active, and he's obviously done enough in the XFL for the Dolphins to say, hey, come spend some time with us in the preseason, in the off season, and they'll get a closer look. It's another DB to add to Vic Fangio's ranks. And I was saying, just before we jumped in there, I saw a highlight package of him, and the first thing I saw was him tackling Jerry Jeudy off a pass off Tua. So he's obviously well acquainted to a few of the Dolphins players, most notably Tua. And yeah, again, it's competition for places, which is never ever a bad thing.
I think it's important. Sorry, I was just going to say, I think it's important to recognise, isn't it? At this point of the off season, not every signing is going to be a needle mover. That's not. There's a lot of bringing in competition and trying things out and saying, oh, actually, maybe I like this guy in the draft process and we weren't able to get him then. We want to see what they've got now. Like there's a lot of trying things out. With the roster being at as many players as it is, there'll be a lot of comings and goings over the next couple of months.
Yeah, somebody who could be a needle mover, as you say, Lee, is Dalvin Cook, who's rumoured to be casualty by being cut by the Vikings after June the 1st. I'm all for that. He's certainly rumoured to be leaning towards signing with the Dolphins, if you believe what it's in the press. I certainly would want him on the books as part of that running back core. Kadeem, do you see an improvement to that running back group, or is he past it, Dalvin?
I don't think he's past it at all. I know there'll be people who will look at his injuries over the past few years and say, do the Dolphins really want another injury-prone player? But if you get if you have the chance to bring in a player of Dalvin Cook's caliber, it can't be a bad thing. And I also think it allows the Dolphins to, you know, it's it's something different. Yes, they drafted Devon A-Chain in the last draft, but I'm sure again, camp competition, in season competition, Dalvin Cook will probably be more than just a camp body. But it allowed the Dolphins to have a versatile backfield, a versatile running back room, and that can only be a good thing going into the season.
I was going to say, I'd be interested to find out from both of you guys if Dalvin Cook was a Dolphin this time next week, where would you position him in the running back room? Because to me, he instantly becomes the best running back in the room. So it's an absolute no-brainer if you can do it.
I mean, for me, I think you're right. It's a no-brainer if you can do it. But I wouldn't look at that running back room and say there's a clear number one. I think we know that it's running back by committee, whatever the combination of running backs. Not sure Dalvin would last the full season being the outright number one, leading carries every week. I think you've got to watch his body of work to ensure that he stays free from injury. So, and that fits well with Mike McDaniel's offense in terms of the rotation of those running backs. So I don't necessarily see Lee any particular running back number one as such, but you combine all of them together, I think it looks to be more of a formidable group, if you see what I mean.
Oh, certainly. I mean, I don't see him as being given the carries of a number one back. I just think he's instantly the best back in the room. I think Mike McDaniel is always going to be the best guy in the best situation, but limiting Dalvin's touches throughout the season is actually the best way of having him play his best football at the most meaningful time of year, which is what Minnesota have always struggled to get, is they seem to have run him into the ground through the first 14 weeks. And then you get to those last few weeks and it's tough sledding. So I just think if you have the opportunity to add that sort of player, I think it's a no-brainer. Also, Buffalo are always interested in running backs. So
yeah, I think player who's got a couple of years left at the sort of top elite level, the Dolphins are in win now mode. And I think he would instantly improve that running back room. Kadeem, wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, 100%. And I think, to piggyback off what Lee said, the Dolphins don't need him to carry the ball, 20 to 30 times a game. It could be a situation where there's some games they will lean on Dalvin Cook a bit more than the others. But, you've also got Raheem Mostert, you've got Jeff Wilson. And I think, Devon A-Chain, I think he's going to prove his worth, from quite early on, because when you have that kind of breakaway speed, it's like, well, do you know what? This is brilliant, And anytime he gets the ball in the backfield, you never know when he's going to break off a 75-yard run touchdown. And I think Dalvin Cook's ability to keep going after contact will make a massive difference as well. It might be something which the Dolphins use him in a few late game situations where they've got a lead, third quarter, I want to kind of, kill some clock. So you chuck on Dalvin Cook, who's just going to, grind his way to 4, 5, 6 yards. And then, you can, bring him out when the defense is tired. Devon A-Chain, where he Mostert. So listen, Dalvin Cook, like you guys said, comes in and just by his quality alone comes in and is, running back number one. But we don't need him to be the bell cow through 17 weeks of the season.
I mean, you mentioned Devon A-Chain there. Want to get your guys' thoughts on an article that appeared in the Miami Herald this week. Can't remember who wrote it, but there was a question mark over his height and his weight. He's listed at 5'8", 188 pounds. There is some doubt in the NFL circles whether he can be a true lead back. Obviously, that's not necessarily what Mike McDaniel's offense is all about, but from a playing perspective, Kadeem, and I'll hand it off to you first. Do you think he's got for you, is there any concerns over his height and his weight, given what he's listed at, or do you not see that as too much of a concern, given the explosive playmaking ability he's got?
I think, not to be super negative or anything like that, there's always concerns about any player of any size and any weight. The NFL is a league in which we've seen so often over the years. One hit can, drastically change someone's career. So, it doesn't matter how big you are, how tall you are, you get hit by a certain player and, you go down injured. So Devon A-Chain, I guess, is shifty enough that, hey, good luck trying to catch him, trying to hit him. I'm sure he's very aware of his size and height, and he's very aware, hey, if I've got a massive safety coming down, I might need to protect myself differently, compared to having a cornerback, essentially, running down at him. So I think it's one of those things where you can see why teams passed on him, but you can also see why the Dolphins took him. Again, that regardless of his height and his weight, that speed is something you just can't teach. That speed is something in which there will be teams, 31 other teams across the league, watching Devon A-Chain this week go, maybe we should have drafted him when he's, breaking 60-yard ones, like essentially like he's playing against us two, or us three, I should say. Like he's going to be great to watch. And size and weight, it makes no difference.
Yeah, I mean, I like the fact that he's quite versatile. He can line up in the backfield, he can line up in the slot, or to quote him in that said article, he can also line up as a receiver as well. So very much looking forward to seeing him out of the field. Lee.
I mean, he's got track speed. Now, let me flip the question a slightly different way. Can I offer you a 5'10" receiver with tracks? A 5'10" wide receiver with track speed, because most people would tell you 5'10" is too short to play wide receiver, whereas we've got one of the best in the league, and he's 5'10". So I think, and stays pretty much healthy, touch wood, so look, we'll find out if it's a problem, but we'll find out once we get to the season. I think it's amazing, isn't it, how people like to kind of predict this person's too small, whereas we've seen players that are too big and find it hard to move quick enough. And we've seen all sorts of different kind of variations. Look, if it works for him, great. It's obviously stood him in good enough stead to get through college and to be drafted. And you saw the excitement on Mike McDaniel's face when he was drafted. I think that tells you all you need to know. We'll see how it pans out when we get further through the season. But his speed is certainly exciting, and his versatility. I mean, to me, one of the most exciting things is the prospect of seeing him on special teams as well. It's a really great way to be able to get him onto the field early and often.
I was just going to say as well, we saw a lot, last season of all the motion and stuff like that, and or the Dolphins coming out with one running back in the backfield and then motion them out, to line up in the slot or something. The Dolphins, I am sure, many times over the season are going to line up with Hill and Waddle on the outside, and then Mostert and A-Chain in the backfield. And then you're going to motion Mostert to the right, and then KC, the defense have done this. Then you're going to motion A-Chain to the left, and McDaniel and Tua can say to every single team in the NFL, try and stop this. We're going to have 4 guys run straight past you, and you're going to blink and miss them. And again, it's that versatility, and also on special teams as well. Going back to, we've got the Chiefs this season. Going back to that Chiefs game, we played them a couple of years ago in Tua's rookie season, and how they killed us with Tyreek Hill on special teams. There was a massive discussion in the offseason, who's going to play special teams, Jalen Waddle or Tyreek Hill. End up being neither. But you add, Devon A-Chain there as well. There might be a time where you have Devon A-Chain, Jalen Waddle, and Tyreek Hill just standing there saying, I dare you to get the ball to one of us. It's the last time you do it. I promise you that.
I mean, it's a mouth-watering prospect, isn't it, to see all that speed on the field? And don't forget, you can throw Braxton Berrios into the mix as well, because he's no slouch either. So, yeah, very much looking forward to seeing the plays they can draw up for him. So on to the regular season then. The schedule came out this past week. Just want to talk to each of you in turns about your pros and cons of the schedule. I'll start initially on some pros. The 3 things that stood out to me on the schedule is no cold weather games late in the season, which I think is a bonus. Yeah, they got Baltimore away, but that's not necessarily traditionally what you would call a cold weather game, where there's likely to be really bad weather. 4 of the last 5 at home as well is a great finish. You want to be playing your best football at the end of the season, and the sort of home advantage that the weather gives you at Hard Rock Stadium. So to have 4 of your last 5 games at home is a bonus. And the last thing that I have noted in terms of a pro is regarding travel. With the exception of the Chargers and Chiefs games, the Dolphins don't leave the Eastern time zone in the US. And the good thing about these two long trips is that the Chiefs game has been offset by a bye the following week. So they get plenty of rest after a long trip abroad. And the Chargers game, obviously, week one, where they can travel out early and are not restricted by any sort of prior week's games necessarily. So they can pretty much set their own schedule in terms of traveling out west to play the Chargers. So those two long trips have been kind of offset. Now, there was an interesting graphic doing the rounds on Twitter that the Dolphins are one of the most traveled teams this season, but that was kind of in terms of mileage, but that was kind of misleading because it was the Chiefs game that threw the Dolphins to the top of that list. You take the Chiefs, the trip to Frankfurt out of the equation and instead fly the Dolphins to KC and back, they would have in fact been near the bottom of that list. So the fact that they've only got two trips outside the Eastern time zone is a massive plus in terms of the amount they're going to travel. And that was the one thing that I took from the schedule in terms of a pro. Throw it your way, Lee, first of all, some pros looking at the schedule. Did you pick out any nuggets from looking at the week by week listing?
Yeah, I thought there's only one short week in there, really. I mean, I know it's a couple of Sunday night football games, which are late. It means getting out of town late, but really it's just the Black Friday game in New York, which is going to be on a short week. Playing the Jets. Hang on, was it the Jets? Yeah, playing the Jets twice in a 4-week span could be beneficial. I think that's kind of interesting at that time of year, kind of in the, let's say, the back end of the schedule. It's certainly in the second half. After the bye week, you hope to be kind of really on a roll by then. And also, I thought not necessarily a pro or con, but just something that I think super interesting is Dolphins are wanted in prime time. The Dolphins are wanted on national TV, and I think we see a lot of back and forth between fans. Is the team going to be good? Is the team going to be bad? The schedule makers think the Dolphins are going to be an interesting and certainly competitive team. That's why they want them on these, on these nationally televised games. I include Germany in that, even though it's obviously an early kickoff Eastern time. But yeah, I think a bunch of Sunday night football games tells you how much the Dolphins are kind of coveted by the networks.
Yeah, shame they've only got one primetime game at home, really, isn't it, against Tennessee? But we'll come on to that shortly. Kadeem, observations that you took out from looking at the schedule?
Yeah, only one home game in September. It's a bit annoying. You really want to maximize that sun, which caused Buffalo so many issues last year to the point where they complain about it. So yeah, only one home. Pardon?
And the New York Knicks.
Yeah, it's mental. But yeah, one home game was a bit fair enough. But the flip side is that there's no, 3 away game stretch, which, over the past few years have been quite annoying. I think the only time we have, back-to-back road games twice on weeks 1 and 2, and then weeks 12 and 13. Like Lee said, only one real short week, and it's a Friday, so it's not that bad. 3 home games tailored in the season can, hopefully all fingers and toes crossed, you're looking at win those 3 and you wrap up the 1 seed. And then I guess, yes, I said that there's only one home game in September, but we don't have any super cold games, back into the season. It could have been horrible having to go to Buffalo in week 16, 17, 18, or, essentially having New England late in the season as well. So yeah, it's in terms of the schedule, this is probably the best it could have looked like. The one interesting thing is, I don't know if you guys have seen this, but they're saying the Dolphins only have 3 primetime games. They're not classing the Black Friday game as primetime because usually there's no games on a Friday, and then the KC game, because it kicks off so early, that's not primetime either. So where they're going, hey, it's 5 primetime games. I was trying to say, well, it's only 3, but the Dolphins, do they call it what, standalone games? I guess.
Yeah.
Nationally
games.
televised games.
Yeah, so Dolphins have 5 standalone games, I guess. So yeah, it's people want to see the Dolphins, and don't be surprised if that Buffalo game week 18 gets flexed as well.
Yeah, I mean, moving on to some things that I wasn't too pleased about with regards to the schedule. You've already mentioned the first one, Kadeem. 3 out of the first 4 away from Hard Rock. You don't get that home field advantage in terms of the weather, but then if you're going to have it at the end, you can't really have it at the beginning. I'll come to you in a second, Lee. The other thing was you've got a pretty difficult run towards the end of the season. Yes, you do have 4 out of 5 at home, but your last 3 games are all against teams, Dallas, Baltimore, Buffalo, who you'd expect to be in playoff contention. So whilst you do have a relatively hard-looking schedule on paper, now at least you do have them at home rather than away. And the other thing that I noticed as well, in the middle of the season between weeks 7 and 10, you have arguably the 2 most difficult fixtures on the schedule in Philly and KC within that short space of time. Sandwiched in between is a game with New England that you'd like to see them favoured, but also a bye. So you don't, apart from that New England game, they're only going to be playing at home once between weeks 6 and 11. So that to me was something of worth note, that you're playing Philly and KC away with twice within the space of 3 weeks. Go on, Lee, I'll throw it over to you.
I was just going to say, I think it's interesting. Obviously, you know, I'm a huge proponent of as many games in the hot weather as possible, because that sucks for away teams. But I think if we don't want to play cold games, it means we can't play super hot games. There's just simply not enough games to go around. But do you think there is a bigger difference in temperature late in the season where it's getting cold everywhere else, but Miami's still hot? Let's be honest, right? If we were to go to Miami in November, December, when it's cooling down for Miami temperatures, like for us, it's still shorts and t-shirts. Like so I think it might actually be just as much of an advantage to us. Not just as much. That's over the top. But I think it's probably a bigger advantage to us like this to not play in the cold and have those games in Miami late in the season than it would be to just have them stacked at the front and have to go and play in the cold. I think this is a good blend of us not having to play in the cold is actually probably slightly more important than the searing hot weather.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit surprised that the schedule makers didn't flip those Buffalo games, because it made for great storytelling, didn't it? And both matchups were close. Then the matchup again in the playoffs is close. So, I mean, you could flip the results, but I don't know. It just seems to remove a storyline somewhat from it that I know, you know, the NFL loves to tell the story.
Right. Anything, Kadeem, before we move on in taking a look at the schedule in a little bit more detail? Any final thoughts on your general thoughts?
I guess, yeah, just to end with a home game at Hard Rock Stadium against Buffalo. The opposition could have been better, but it's always nice to end the season at home, because if for whatever reason you need to win, you want to get it in front of your fans. You don't want to be out on the road where, you know, anything can happen, I guess.
Yeah, either winner takes all kind of matchup. Who knows for what seed that game could be in play. And if the Dolphins have already clinched, then great. If the Bills have already clinched, then you'd like to think they'd be resting their starters in inverted commas, which can only be advantageous. But yeah, it's got the makings of a fascinating season finale, hasn't it? Okay, looking at the schedule then a little bit more detail. I thought we'd do it in chunks. So weeks 1 to 4, we've got the LA Chargers away, followed by New England on Sunday Night Football, then Denver at home and Buffalo away. How do you see those first 4 games going, Kadeem? Obviously, we've got the old Tua versus Justin Herbert in week 1, and we have Vic Fangio playing against the Denver Broncos in week 3, who are traveling from west to east, which is always notoriously difficult for a Western-based team to do. How do you see those first 4 weeks going?
I have us going 3-1. I'm still torn if it's going to be a loss in the opening week and then we go in a run of 3 straight, or we go on a run of 3 straight and then lose to Buffalo. It's depending on what day and what hour you catch me on, I kind of flip flop between what it is. But I think the New England and the Denver games should be fairly routine wins. Tua hasn't lost to New England yet. And in 2023, I'm not scared of Russell Wilson and the Denver Broncos. No offense to either one, I guess.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I'm very much along the same lines, thinking that this team has got the opportunity to get off to a really good 3-1 start, even though there are 3 road games. Lee, how do you see those first 4 panning out?
I think I'm really intrigued to see how they approach this Chargers game with them putting up kind of a bad display there last season. I think also those West Coast trips last year, let's be honest, like, didn't play their best football in San Francisco. I think they get it right. I don't think they go into Los Angeles and play bad football twice in a row. I think they get it sorted out. There were so many things in that game last year that were close that I think they come over the hump. I think they're a better team than New England, quite simply. Denver are intriguing. Experienced coaches worry me more than teams with new rookie head coaches. Like Sean Payton knows what he's doing. But the Broncos really did struggle somewhat last year. So I actually will I'll go 3-1 as well through the first 4.
The Chargers one is an interesting one because, like you, Kadeem, I can see that one going either way. But the way I'm looking at it now is that the Chargers are installing a brand new offense, and they have their top pick in the draft was a wide receiver, and that's going to be his first NFL game. And traditionally, they take a bit of time to settle into a routine in the NFL. So maybe the fact that the Chargers are installing a new offense is possibly a good time to play them.
Yeah, definitely. And I also think, we'll see the absolute bare bones of Vic Fangio's defense in the preseason. So week 1, Justin Herbert won't know what the Dolphins are going to throw at him. So, no, I think, Vic Fangio should have enough to beat the Chargers. The offense should have enough to beat the Chargers. I think it'll be a good game. It'll be an entertaining game. It'll be an interesting game if the Dolphins lose because the national media will not run with it. Justin Herbert's beat Tua again. This team meant to do X, Y, and Z, but I wouldn't worry too much. I think even if the Dolphins do lose, it will be a close fought game, and people will come out of it going, "Do you know what? Even in a loss, this Dolphins team are one to watch out for."
Yeah, hot off the press, the Dolphins have just formally announced the signing of Isaiah Wynn, and they have also signed tackle Cedric Ogbuehi. However, excuse my pronunciation of him, but they've signed 2 tackles. The latter played 8 NFL seasons for 5 different franchises, so got a bit of experience. Last played for the Jets in 2022, I believe. So yeah, hot off the press. Okay, moving on to weeks 5 and 6, then the Giants at home, followed by Carolina at home. 2 early scheduled games. You'd like to think the Dolphins would have the better of both of those teams. And of course, the game against the Panthers potentially will see Tua versus Bryce Young, another Alabama matchup. Hopefully you guys agree that those 2 home games, whilst not to be taken lightly, they should come through those relatively unscathed.
I just wanted to point out the Dolphins actually have a really quite poor record against the New York Giants, including at home. Giants lead the series 4-1 in Miami, with our only win being 2 seasons ago.
You were there for that one, weren't you, Lee?
I was there for that one. It was a good game, but Daniel Jones didn't play in that game. Backup quarterback played. So I think it's one of those. The Giants made the playoffs last year. Their schedule is going to be harder. I think no one really knows where to place the Giants because last year they performed better than expected. I think Brian Dable was a fantastic coach. Dolphins need to take that game super seriously. I mean, we won the last matchup 20-9, but 4-1 in Miami, and the Giants lead the series overall. Need to keep an eye on it.
Kadeem, what are your thoughts about those 2 games, in those 2 weeks?
Yeah, it'll be the Giants. The Giants aren't a team I'm afraid of, but at the same time, they're it sounds really weird, a good old-fashioned NFL franchise. And it's like, not to kind of switch sports or anything like that, but it's like the Giants are a team in which, if you don't take them seriously, they'll beat you. It's like, hey, we aren't one of these new boys. We're a well-established franchise who know exactly what they're doing. So, but I'm confident we win that game. The Panthers game will be really interesting as well, because it's like, okay, new quarterback, rookie quarterback, how's he fared in his first few games in the NFL? Again, coming up against what we hope is a very, very good defense that Vic Fangio is running. And if we don't see a rookie quarterback, is that because they've started someone else for the start of the season? And, it could be a situation where they get off to a poor start and they choose to bring him in around week 6. That could be one of his first games. So I think we'll have too much for the Panthers as well. For a team that has aspirations of the playoffs and Super Bowl, you should be beating the Giants and the Panthers and not really having too much worry, because if we're being brutally honest, we have a lot harder games this year. And if we're struggling against the Giants and the Panthers, yes, the Giants are a playoff team, but we have bigger fish to fry if we really want to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. So at that point then in the season, if everything goes according to plan, the Dolphins are hopefully looking at a sort of a 5-1 record going into week 7, where they play the Eagles on Sunday Night Football. And the next bunch of games I've already touched on. That's week 7 through 10, where they got the Eagles, followed by New England, then the trip to Germany, followed by bye. So I've already mentioned about the fact that they got Philly and KC away in 2 out of 3 weeks. But Kadeem, anything... how do you look at that schedule run of games? Would you be happy with a 1-2 record, or if assuming they are the underdogs and lose away to Philly and KC, or would you be expecting more at that time of the season?
I think that Philly matchup will be really interesting. Was it Brandon Graham during Super Bowl week who said he expected the Dolphins to be in Super Bowl? He said we played them last preseason, practiced against them. We thought they were going to be a Super Bowl matchup. So it's the Super Bowl that we all kind of wanted, I guess. The Philadelphia Eagles, in terms of how to run a franchise, in terms of draft picks, are up there with one of, if not the best. So it will be a really, really interesting game. Sunday Night Football, Tua versus Jalen Hurts. Hurts off his, brand new contract. I had that game down as a loss, and a second loss of the season. But at the same time, I do believe that, again, another close game, Sunday Night Football. And then New England, again, Tua hasn't lost to Bill Belichick in New England since he's been drafted. I'm not too worried about New England. So yeah, I think if we can go for the first 8 games, I've got us at 6-2. Should put us in really good stead ahead of the KC game and then the rest of the season, I guess.
Absolutely, Lee. Are you planning to go to Germany, traveling from the UK, or are you going to sit and watch that one from home?
No, that's way too close for me not to try and get to. I mean, today I've actually gone through and booked time off for that, booked time off to get over to Miami as well. I've selected my games, taken my chance, and I'm going to try and get over to Miami for 2 games and hopefully Germany for a game as well.
Are you doing the back-to-back Giants and Panthers game, or have you got 2 others earmarked?
No, just that. It makes too much sense to me to not do those 2 games back-to-back. I'd love to get out for the triple header late in the season, because I love primetime football, especially at Hard Rock. I think it's a great atmosphere. It's great to see night games in Miami. So that would have been a great run. It's just too hard for me to get out in December with work and stuff. But yeah, that October couple of weeks is pretty sweet. I was very happy when I saw those on the schedule.
Yeah, I'm looking to possibly get out for one. Which one yet to be determined. Could be fan club weekend game, which we'll find out this week, I believe, which week that's going to be. If I had to guess now, I'd say New England towards the end of October, or Carolina middle of October. But we should find out for definite this week, which is fan club weekend. Failing that, not yet. Maybe the Raiders on the 19th of November, because my dad was a Raiders fan and
Oh, nice.
they're playing him on they're playing on what would have been his birthday on November the 19th. So I might see if I can get that one out in memory, see that one in memory of my dad. But other than that, yeah, there's plenty of opportunities. That Monday Night Football one is certainly mouthwatering, but we'll come on to that shortly. Next.
Sorry, just before we move on, I just want to touch on the Philadelphia Eagles game a little bit, because here's where I differ from everybody else. Everybody is doing the same thing that happens every single season, where it's this team will runner up in the Super Bowl. They must be the hardest team on everybody's schedule next year. Why? Because history tells us that doesn't happen very often. Even after the Eagles won a Super Bowl, yes, the team's constructed completely different, but as I say, history tells us that this happens often. When you make a Super Bowl and don't make it, and don't win, you don't make it back to the Super Bowl the next year. It happens very rarely. Even after the Eagles won the Super Bowl, going 13-3, the next year they came back with a 9-7 record and losing there's a wild card. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. I'm not ready to put them at that status until they start playing that well this season, because it just happens so many times. The Falcons, when they went to the Super Bowl, the Panthers, when they went to the Super Bowl, the next year they come back and struggle mightily. How many people installed the Rams last season as, well, that's going to be the team to beat because they won the Super Bowl? And how did that pan out for them? I think we need to take this into account, that just because a team was good last season, and this could apply to us as well, just because you were good last season does not mean you've got better. Some teams will be going backwards, and there is a chance that the Eagles are one of those teams. I think it's a super interesting matchup. Hurts, Tua, Smith, Waddle, and Hill against Brett. The matchup is absolutely blockbuster on paper, but I think, it's a blockbuster because we're half of the teams in it.
Yeah, talking to teams going backwards, our next chunk of games to look at includes the Jets on week 12. Either side of that, you have the Raiders at home and the Washington Commanders away. So a nice 3-game stretch that on paper doesn't necessarily scare me too much. I think, again, if you want to contend at the end of the season in the playoff, all of those games you should be looking to win and win comfortably. Kadeem, do you see any cause for concern looking at those stretch of 3 games, or am I too confident?
No, I think you kind of said it really, really well. I think the interesting thing about that Jets game is if they're not in playoff contention by week 12, how is Aaron Rodgers doing? Has he already come out and said, you know what? I hate New York. I hate you guys. I'm not staying here for the duration of my contract. I'm retiring in the season. I think this is when the schedule looks not easy, but if the Dolphins can get out of the bye with a winning record and 2-3 games over 500, I think they'll look at that stretch and go, this is where we can really start to pick up wins, pick up momentum, make a genuine attempt at the 1 seed and go, yeah, now's the time. And again, it's games not won on paper. If we was to ask any Dolphins player right now, what do you make of, week 11, week 12, week 13, they'll be saying, we haven't got to week 1 yet, haven't got to preseason week 1 yet. We're not thinking that far ahead. But, they're human. They will look at that and go, yeah, there's a really nice opportunity to go on a real run and, cement ourselves as the team to beat, and not just the AFC, but the NFL in general.
I think it's quite ironic that after Aaron Rodgers went into his dark retreat during the off-season, they've got him playing on Black Friday. There's a common theme there, I think, with Aaron Rodgers and the dark. But Lee, what do you think around that stretch? It seems to be set up well for heading into the final few games of the season. But couple of teams, Washington, we haven't played for a few years. They've got a new quarterback this forthcoming season in Sam Howell, being backed up by Jacoby Brissett, I believe. We talked about Rodgers and, of course, Jimmy G playing for the Raiders. Not the strongest set of quarterbacks in the world, you would have said there.
No, I think obviously Jimmy G is super interesting being back with Josh McDaniels. That is a interesting pairing. I think it made the most sense, but they could be anything. It still baffles me how they moved on from Derek Carr in the way that went down. I'm not sure how they managed to heap so much blame on Derek Carr, but anyway, the Jets could obviously be anything, but there's a great chance to. I mean, if you look at that, if that's another part of the schedule where you can come out of it 3-1. Hey, if you can win every quarter of the season 3-1, you're going to be pretty happy at the end of the year. So, yeah.
Awesome. Right, that leads nicely into the last 5 games of the season. As I mentioned earlier, we've got 4 of the last 5 at home, starting off with Tennessee on Monday Night Football, followed by a rematch with the Jets. And then we have the Cowboys, Ravens away, and Buffalo at home, which we've already mentioned. Pretty mouth-watering finale to the season. The Dolphins are in contention, and you'd like to think that the likes of even the Tennessee Titans would be in contention given the strength of their division. So it's not going to be a pushover. It's going to be a thrilling end to the season, isn't it, Kadeem?
Yeah, but I wouldn't be surprised if Tennessee are playing a rookie quarterback by the time we get to that game. So we could potentially see 2 rookie quarterbacks this season. Tennessee, Monday Night Football at Miami. I know a lot of Dolphin fans will look back at the last time we played Tennessee and be like, we don't want a repeat of that. And I don't think we will. I think it'll be an interesting game. I expect us to win that game. I think I have us losing 1 game in those final 5. And I think it might be either Baltimore or Buffalo. So again, there's nothing which makes me sit here and go, I'm genuinely worried. Tennessee, New York Jets, even the Cowboys. The Cowboys are a kind of team I look at and go, we should have the Cowboys number and have it quite as comfortable as you can, I guess, against a team which have playoff aspirations. But again, like I keep on saying, we as fans, as a franchise, as the team, I guess, are looking well past, not just making the playoffs. It's going on a deep run in the playoffs. And in order to do that, as Lee so eloquently put, you want to be going 3-1, across every 4 games. So 5 games to go. I think the Dolphins, if everything goes to plan, and it very rarely does, in life, let alone in football, if everything goes to plan, they go into those final 5 games on course to clinching the 1 seed. And I think we have a genuine chance of doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned about the possibility of the Dolphins playing against Will Levis if he's in the driving seat for the Tennessee Titans. On the flip side to that, Lamar Jackson tends to suffer from late season injuries. How many games has he missed over the last few seasons due to injury, particularly late in the season when players get naturally bruised and battered? So there is that potential that he may not even face the Dolphins in week 17. Obviously, there's a lot of football to be played between now and then, but it's something to ponder on. Just makes that Baltimore game look completely different if depending on whether Lamar Jackson plays in that or not. I mean, it's too early to be saying whether he's going to play or not, but you get the idea.
Yeah, I wonder as well. Did the Dolphins manage to break the hump of this, going to Baltimore and getting absolutely smashed? Because last year it looked like it was on for another absolute drubbing in Baltimore before the late game heroics and to be honest, a quite magical performance by Tua. Along with Waddle and Hill on offense to put points up on the board and put them up quickly as well. I mean, obviously we remember that game fondly. It was a great afternoon watching football, but I can't think there's many people that told you at halftime that you shouldn't not be worried that this isn't going to be an absolute drubbing. I must say, I did say this to Jay at halftime. This is my favorite thing to say to Jay at halftime if things are going bad is all they've done is prove that you can score that many points in a half. And if they can do it, we can do it. And that's exactly what happened. But yeah, I mean, at halftime, I can't say I wasn't a little bit concerned because that game was looking horrible.
Okay, then so that's brought to a close a look at the all 18 weeks. In terms of end of season predictions, we had a sort of we predicted our win-loss record last week, Lee, didn't we, Lee, before the season came out. Has your mind changed looking at how favourable the schedule seems to be? Or are you going to predict a perfect season?
Always predicting a perfect season. I'm not going to pick against the Dolphins all year anyway. But to be honest, I was trying to think about this earlier. Does the way the schedule is laid out change my way too early predictions for the Dolphins record? And the answer is no, because nothing has changed. Nothing has changed since last week. We found out the schedule, but do I think there's anything in there where the only possible thing that is so far out of the norm that I would say could flip a win to a loss is traveling internationally. And I don't think that's going to be the case. I think it will be a good game. That game could go either way anyway. So, anything that I thought last week has not been changed by the fact that they're now playing at, for instance, 9:30 UK time, week 1. Like if that game had been the 6 o'clock UK time kickoff in week 4, would I have been more concerned? Not really. Los Angeles is still just as far away. They've still got to play a good team. Like I say, I'd be more. I think we'll have more information once we get to training camp, once we see some preseason stuff. Then we can start making some educated guesses on what's going to happen. At this point, we're simply going off of last year plus the additions, and I think the Dolphins move forward. So yeah, it doesn't change my thoughts on the record at all.
For me, it slightly does, actually. I look at the schedule and think there's no 3-game stretch like we had last year when we played the 49ers, the Chargers and the Bills in 3 consecutive weeks, which we always knew was going to be difficult on paper. And of course, as much as winning breeds winning, losing is also a habit that teams struggle to get out of. And I don't look at any part of that schedule and think the Dolphins are going to go on a losing run, because they haven't got a run of games like they had last year where losing could become a habit. Similarly, the benefit of playing the Chargers away early is also going to hopefully work in their favor in terms of them not having to fly on a shorter preparation time. So it's little things like that make me think the scheduling gods are in their favor, and obviously losing becomes a habit, as I say, but winning becomes a habit as well. And if the Dolphins can get on a good early season run, it's important that I think they do that so that they're not playing catch up, and the schedule seems to help them in that respect. So I can see the Dolphins, I think, picking up a win or 2 more than what I was potentially predicting last week. Kadeem, what are your thoughts on the sort of overall win-loss record, having gone through each of the chunks of the season?
So my way to early prediction is we go 13-4. I do think there are a few games where I'm in an R in, and 13-4 can very easily go to 10-7, I guess. But I still think that's the floor. That is, this team, barring any injuries and injuries to key players, is a minimum 10-11 win team at the absolute minimum. And I think a perfect season would be absolutely amazing, but there's only going to be one game which is going to throw you up. So I think anywhere between 11 and 15 wins is what I'm predicting right now. Yeah, like you said, there's no 3 away game horrible stretch. There's no trips in, I guess, like November, December to, New York to play the Giants, to New York to play the Jets, and then to Gillette Stadium to play the Patriots, and then to Buffalo. Is we've kind of managed to avoid that. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting season, and once after the first 2 or 3 games and kind of really see what teams are, then we'll kind of look at it and go, actually, we could really be pushing for 15, 16 wins there.
Yeah, season of promise for sure, I think. Very, very exciting. So any further final thoughts, chaps, before we knock this podcast on the head? Kadeem, as you're the resident guest, any final thoughts?
I had a final thought. To be honest, one thing we hadn't mentioned was the preseason. And yes, the preseason isn't going to affect our record necessarily, but I thought playing the Falcons at home and then Jacksonville on the road and not being far away, I wonder if these are potential joint practice teams for the off season. We know the Dolphins favored joint practices last year, and have done kind of over the last few years, even under Coach Flores. So, I mean, yeah, those seem like kind of good opportunities to host joint practices.
So I saw on the Dolphins app that they'd got the Falcons home game scheduled as a preseason game. I must have missed that totally because it caught me out. But you're saying they've got the Jags scheduled as an away game as well.
Jags is an away game, yeah. So it's Atlanta. That is a TBD date and time. Obviously, they're playing on the road at Houston on the 20th of September. That's a 1 a.m. kickoff here, and Jacksonville is TBD as well. But obviously, being a Florida team, I don't know. It just seems close. Kind of makes sense that it'd be an easy trip to host and take a second opportunity to host a joint practice.
It's interesting because I'm in Orlando. I'm going to do all the Disney stuff in mid to late August. So hopefully, how far away is Jacksonville to Orlando?
That game will be the... Oh, hang on. I got that date wrong, didn't I? I said the 20th of September, it'll be the 20th of August. So it'll be the 27th of August-ish from Orlando. I think it's about 4 hours.
Oh, is there a train?
I think there is, but it's such an easy drive. I've done it a couple of times up to Jacksonville. Definitely, if you get a chance to hop in the car and go straight up the freeway.
Talking of those who travel from Orlando to watch Dolphins games in Miami, there is a new train line. The Bright Line service is opening in Orlando and will be going direct to Miami soon. I believe they are due to open it by the start of next season, and there is a stop on that train line near Aventura, Lee, where I know you've stayed there, near there. I believe that is a stop, and I also believe that they are doing shuttle buses to and from the stadium from that train stop as well. So for those who are looking to travel to Miami, keep an eye out and do some research on the Bright Line service, because that might be something to take advantage of next season.
That is very intriguing.
Naeem, anything final from you before we draw to a close?
I think pre-season we'll see more and more joint practices. It really just allows you to essentially, without the bright lights and the cameras and showing every single team in the NFL what you're doing, you can run some stuff, and then it allows you in the pre-season games to, play the bubble players to kind of see what they look like under lights and stuff like that. So I wouldn't be surprised if, these 3 pre-season games end up being joint practices as well, which makes the pre-season games, Skylar Thompson, Mike White, and loads more, Erica Zukama, Elijah Higgins, and guys like that, guys who I guess need the reps on the field as opposed to the practice field.
Okay. Anything, Lee, you coming in?
No, just because I completely agree with Kadeem. I think we see less of the starters, even compared to last season, where we saw Waddle out there, we saw Hill trying to almost take the field a couple of times. I think, second year in Mike McDaniel's offense, that's completely different compared to last year. So I don't think we see that. And I think it's a great opportunity for some of these other guys to get actual kind of game reps. Yes, I know it's the preseason, but when you get past the starters, these guys are playing for jobs in the NFL. It becomes quite intense football. You might not be showing the whole playbook, but for a lot of people, it's very important. So I think it's an interesting time to kind of see the depth and the strength of the roster.
Okay, before we go, Kadeem, do you want to give your podcast a quick plug, and where can we find you on social media and that sort of stuff?
Yeah, so I'm as you mentioned earlier, the co-host of Go Time Dolphins. Go Time Dolphins. It's on YouTube, Apple Music, Spotify, a whole bunch of other podcast apps. I myself am at Kadeem Simmons, SIMMONDS on Twitter. But yeah, Go Time Dolphins is where you normally find me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok as well. So yeah, I'm all over the place talking Call of Duty and Dolphins most of the time.
All right, well, we'll look forward to having you back on the pod in the near future, of course. In the meantime, everybody, thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and we shall talk to you again real soon.